Mhm.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our grant information session on competitive grant opportunities here at the Community Foundation. My name is Liz Jones. I'm the Community Impact Officer, and I'm joined today by Julia. Let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Julia Niles, and I am the grants manager. I'm happy to have you all here today.
We're going to go ahead and screen share, so we have some slides to walk through. Give me just a moment to get that up. And as we shared, we're going to be recording this today for a few people that couldn't make it, and also for all of you. So after our presentation today, we will share out copies of the slides, the recording. If you want to listen to us again, you're more than welcome to, and we'll share some other resources as well. If you have any questions as we go along, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them. And then if not, as we said at the end of our presentation, we will also have time for question and answers. So we're going to get started here. Here's our grant information session. Today, we're going to talk specifically about grant opportunities. And when I say competitive grant opportunities, I'm referring to those that you're going to submit an application for. We have many types of endowment funds here at the Community Foundation. We have over 700 currently, and here are some names of the different types of endowment funds that we have. So some of you may be representing an organization, and you hear from us in multiple ways. So competitive grants, where you're writing an application and asking for support for a project or a purchase that you need to make, might just be one of the many ways. You might also have a relationship with us where we hold an agency endowment fund. An agency endowment fund is a fund that the organization sets up to be able to support your mission or a specific program that you have. We also have donor designated. That's where a donor or a group in the community have set up a fund, again, to benefit a specific organization for a cause or something that they care about. And we also have donor advised funds, where our donor services officer, Lisa, I think many of you might remember her. She was in my position prior to her current position, work with donors who have grant dollars that are available throughout the year to support charitable causes. So sometimes you hear from us for things that you don't write us a full application for, but might be related to those types of funds. Today, we're primarily going to talk about field of interest endowment funds and unrestricted endowment funds. So in some of the communication that we shared, we said on an annual basis, the Community Foundation has $1.5 million that it grants out into the community through our competitive grant processes. And we're talking about those types of funds, so field of interest or unrestricted. I have a few library friends on the call tonight, and so anybody that works in a library that's written a grant to us, the Blossom Fund is probably a name that's very familiar to you. There was a gentleman, David Blossom, who set up an field of interest endowment fund to support local libraries and education. We also have two specific funds out of the whole 700 funds that are specific to churches. So Carl Peterson is another name that's going to be very familiar for some of our churches. And then we also hold scholarship funds, and that's a whole other presentation that we can't get into today, but we do have scholarships that are awarded to area students that are continuing their higher education. What we are going to spend most of our time talking about today are the different grant opportunities. And these are the applications that we host throughout the year. So these are different applications that have specific criteria that we're looking to meet. We're going to walk through a lot of that, and each of them have different deadlines throughout the year. As a community foundation, we can grant to 501c3 nonprofit organizations that are located in or that are serving Southern Chautauqua region. We can also grant to municipalities in school districts for broad public benefit. And as I said, we are a little unique in that we do have 2 funds that are specific to support faith-based organizations for congregational needs, and we're going to cover that in a moment. So we do accept applications from area churches in one of our grant processes. And one of the things you'll hear us talk a lot about as we go through each one of these grant opportunities are volunteers. So we use volunteers from the community across all of our grant making. Julia and I are the staff here at the Community Foundation, and we're here to help and support you through the grant application process and through the review process. It's our job to make sure what you're applying for is a fit. Does it meet the eligibility and the criteria? Then we'll work with you no matter what application you're applying through, just to make sure, you know, the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, that we have everything that we need. We get those materials prepared, and then they're going to go to volunteers. And our volunteers are the ones that are making funding recommendations. We have a broad range of volunteers, and we try hard on our end to make sure we have a mix of volunteers. So they all have different experience, expertise, and perspective. And ultimately, we bring their funding recommendations to our board for approval. So right now, I'm going to hand it right over to Julia, and we're going to start walking through the different grant applications that we have. And Julia, I'm not watching the chat. I can't multitask. Did you happen to throw that link in the chat for them?
Not quite yet, but I will.
And so Julia's going to throw a link in the chat, and it's going to direct you to the Chautauqua Grants website. And so if you have applied to us before, you know this is the website that we direct you to. It serves 2 purposes. So it has public facing information. So all of the information that we're going to be covering today in our slides is on that Chautauqua Grants website. And then it also has the login for the grant portal. All of our grant applications are online grant applications. And so your organization will have a profile on Chautauqua Grants, and you'll have a login associated with that. And so Julia shared a link that's on there. Feel free to click through onto that page. It's a new resource page that we've built out. Again, we'll share all of this information afterwards, but you can take a look. The first one that's on there is 2023 grant opportunities, and that will cover a lot of the 4 applications we're talking about right now. And then on the second page, it's going to give you some examples too. Okay, now Julia, I'm ready to.
Thank you, Liz. So first, I'm going to talk about our general grant process. So general is for one-time costs or emerging needs just outside your operational budget. For example, it could be purchases to help your program help further your charitable mission. It could be startup costs for a new service, emphasis on the new, something that's never been done before, like a pilot program. You can apply for capital improvement projects, maybe some light construction like lighting, flooring, or painting. And another example is technology upgrades. So a copier, scanner, printer, security system, sound system, something along those lines. So we have 6 opportunities a year for general. And the deadline is every other month, every other even month. The last week of the month on Wednesdays is the deadline. And there's a funding decision proceeding a month, towards about the mid-month. And you can request up to $4,000. And faith-based organizations, this one is the process for you. This is the only process for churches because, as Liz referenced earlier, we do have 2 funds set up that are specifically for faith-based organizations or churches. So let's talk a little bit about eligibility. So if a project has already occurred or a purchase has already been made, we do not reimburse those costs. When we award the funding, then the project can begin or the purchase can be made. Also, no consumable or giveaway items. We want something with a little bit more lasting effect. And this is not the process for ongoing programming or general operational support. We'll actually get to that in just a few moments with our community impact grants. Also, sponsorships of one-time events, banquets, fundraisers, trips, registration fees. We are not able to support these types of things. What we are looking for is opportunities to have a lasting impact or extended benefit. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the application. So when you submit an application, we ask for a project name, the amount of the request, the total project cost. If you're only asking for a portion of the funding, we'd like to know the full picture. Description and key activities. So that's, we just want to know what the funding is for, who will be involved, when and where this will happen, and how it will all be implemented. And then we ask for a project budget, and we are just looking for a breakdown of itemized expenses and any revenues that you may use towards this grant request. And then we ask for pricing documentation, any quotes or estimates that you may have, and we do require more than one of those. So usually 2 is fine if that's what you have. So for financials, we are looking for your current year organizational budget, as well as your most recent profit and loss, which could be a treasurer's report or statement of activities. It just tells us how you're doing and where you're at. So those are the financials that we look for. So let's go ahead and talk about criteria. So these bullet points are what the volunteers take into consideration when evaluating your grant requests. I feel the first 3 bullets are pretty clear. Mission alignment, broad impact, preparedness of organization. And then for timing of funding, we're just looking for, is the project going to occur right away when funding is received, or is it more in the future? Do a few more steps need to be taken before it happens? Other things that might impact a funding decision are the amount of dollars that we have available for the year, as well as the volume of requests that we receive. So I'm just going to touch on volunteers real briefly. Once the application is submitted, the staff will review them for completeness. We'll make sure all the documents are there and any other missing information there may be. And then the application goes to a standing committee of volunteers. And everyone reviews all the grants, but one volunteer is specifically assigned to your grant request. So they'll reach out, ask you questions, get any information that they may need, and then they will take that back to the committee. They'll discuss and make a funding recommendation. And just as a reminder, as Liz touched on, you can go to chautauquagrants.org for all of this information. It's under our funders, and you choose our name, and we have each process broken down for you. So at any point throughout the year that you may need that information, you can always go to chautauquagrants.org. So for final reports, everybody will be required to fill out a final report. And really, we try to make it as simple as possible. We are just looking for, have all the funds been expended in the way that they were intended? All right, so I'd like to share with you a few recent grants that have been awarded. So we have a St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church, purchase of new carpet and installation. Then we have Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame with their video recording project, and the Kennedy Fire Department upgrade to high band pages. And on the next page, we have Harmony Historical Society with their renovation project in the reference library, Hurlbut United Methodist Church, audio and video system upgrade, And we have the Sinclairville Library with their parking lot resurfacing project. So of course, these are just a few examples of our recent awards. But if you do have any questions about eligibility, just give us a call and we will be happy to talk you through it. All right, so next I am going to talk a little bit about our geographic region grants. So this is actually very, very similar to our general process, except for that it is for two specific geographic regions. And that is the Faulkner area, which includes Kennedy and Ellington, as well as the Randolph communities. So we're looking for projects to benefit these two geographic areas because we have two funds set up specifically for those geographic regions. So there's only one deadline a year, that's March 1st, with a May funding decision, and you can request up to $2,000. And we have a standing committee of volunteers, one for each geographic region, who will review those grants and then make a funding decision. All right, so now I am going to pass it off to Liz.
Thanks, Julia. So in a moment, I'm going to move and we're going to talk about community impact grants. And I just want to touch upon a few things. So our geographic region funds, we hold two specific funds for those areas that Julia said. Now, it's not that we have, we're choosing these areas over, say, another area of our community. It's again based on the funds that we hold and the purpose of those funds. About 10 years ago, one goes back a little bit further than that. I'll use the example of the Faulkner Region Community Fund, led by the Roaches of Faulkner Printing and many other businesses and those individuals that are involved in the community established this fund. And it's been granting out since, I believe, since 2012. And it provides annual grants, and that amount that is available to be granted out into those communities grows each year. It's kind of a bonus opportunity for organizations that are located in, or it could be an organization that doesn't have a physical location in those immediate communities, but is serving residents of that area. It does have one deadline a year. It tends to overlap with a few of our other ones. So if we have any friends on the call from any of those communities, it's just kind of your strategy of the year of what are your needs and what do you apply for. So next we're going to talk about community impact grants. And we'll get into walking through the criteria and the application that is part of this process. But it really is, it ties back to the general grants that Julia just covered, a lot of that information. All of our grant processes build upon one another. Our general grants are definitely the most accessible. We've really tried to streamline those, make them simple of what's required to apply. That is our broadest reach. I'd say it's our broadest reach geographically. From our southern Chautauqua service area, we go anywhere from Clymer and Finley Lake over to Frewsburg and Faulkner, back to Jamestown and the Lakewood area. And it's our broadest range in the type of organizations that we're working with. We may be working with larger organizations to the smaller, all volunteer-led organizations. You've seen some examples in the photos that Julia had on there. So we work with historical societies, fire departments, libraries, a broad range of organizations there. The next step up will be community impact grants. And the type of grant request that we're looking for here is programming or capital improvement projects that are seeking to address a community need or that are seeking to deliver broad community benefit. So if you remember back to what Julia said, in our general grant application, we're not looking for regular and ongoing programming. If you have a need and you have a request for programming, we're going to probably shift you to come through community impact grants. So when you're keeping in mind of something you're seeking funding for, don't just look at the dollar amount. make sure you're also looking at the type. And as Julia said, feel free to pick up the phone and we can chat about this and talk a little bit more. We hold 2 deadlines. So the spring deadline is going to be March 1st, and then we have a fall deadline for September 1st. There's a little bit more entailed in this grant application and this review process. So there is a little bit more of a delay in a funding decision. So you should have a funding decision by mid-May and by mid-November. And again, you can request up to $20,000. That's the ceiling. And there's a wide range of grants that we make below that ceiling too. Eligibility, so the same as in the general grant process, we do not provide reimbursement. So as you're looking for things that you're applying for, just keep in mind what not only when the deadline is, but when you'll have a funding decision. So if you have a project or a program that was going to start in April, you may be applying on the March 1st date, but you're not going to have a funding decision until mid-May. So just plan accordingly. Another example of that might be given our Western New York weather, if you have more of a capital improvement project that might be outdoors and you want to start in the spring or nicer weather, the fall might be a good time to apply for that. So you have plenty of time to know on a funding decision if you can start that project. You are eligible to apply for more than one application in community impact. You can also apply across the different applications and the opportunities that we're talking about today. So you could apply through general, you could apply for community impact. Again, they're going to be for different projects or different needs that you need funding for, but we have no rule on that. We would encourage you to request the amount of funding that is needed to complete your project, and that's consistent with other sources of funding you're getting for that project and that your organization has the capacity to handle. Next, we'll cover the application. So if you remember back to Julia's slide that was talking about the project name, the amount you're requesting, you'll see description and key activities are the narrative that you're gonna type out. You're gonna tell us the what and the why of your project, and then you're gonna tell us some other activities of the who, when, where, and how. I think I got all of them in there. Again, you'll need a project budget. If it is more of a capital type project or a purchase that you're going to be making, we would request that you would have documentation like quotes or bids that are going to back up where you got those costs from. If it's a more programmatic request, that might not be required. We'll also work with you as part of this process of what additional items would be helpful to support your request. We don't ask for that much narrative. We want to get kind of the key points so we can talk about that, but maybe you have some other reports that have impact statistics or pictures of, program delivery or photos of your space. And if they would complement and supplement your request, we'll work with you on that. Other grantees may come through community impact grant application for programmatic requests, and maybe they come through on an annual basis. So if there's any thing that you're requesting reoccurring funding for, we'll work with you to incorporate some of the information that you've submitted in your final reports. In this case as well, your project budget could be your budget. So as we talk about programming type requests, that could also mean general operating request. We had somebody, can't see all your faces on our screen right now, so I'll pick some of our guests that were at our in-person meeting yesterday. I've talked with Sherry, who runs St. Susan Center, so the soup kitchen. I said, it doesn't have to be that you have a specific program and don't create a new thing that you have to do. A programmatic request might also just be what you do and serving out your mission. And in that case, if she was requesting overall funding for just what they do on a regular basis, her project budget or your project budget would be the same as your organizational budget. And you don't have to delineate what the costs are within that. The financials that are part of this application would be your organizational budget, profit and loss, treasurer's report, something that's going to give us the actuals, and a balance sheet. And the balance sheet is going to show you what assets you're holding. Whether it's for the general application or for this one, we're happy to work with you and what you already have. Please don't recreate something for us. That's just going to be a lot of time on your end, and it's probably not going to show us how your organization is operating as well. There is, if your organization meets the financial thresholds and you're required to have audited financial statements, or your annual Form 990, we would ask that you upload those as well. It's not a requirement if your organization is smaller. Not having audited financials isn't going to keep you out of this grant application process. And again, we work with all types of organizations, so municipalities, school districts. Sometimes it gets a little fuzzy. We're happy to work with you on what we need and what you have, what we can include there. Criteria. So this is the criteria that we're looking for in community impact grants. Again, you'll see some similarities. This lays over what we had started to talk about in general. And some of the narrative of the questions you're going to be answering in the application are going to give responses to these questions and these areas that the volunteers are considering. Otherwise, those might be some key areas that you're going to try to point out when you're writing your narrative, or some questions and things that might come up. We're going to get into some examples. I promise you there's some photos coming up to keep you engaged here, but I'll just point out a few things. So down here, we say considerations also given to how you've put your project budget together. So for a bigger request, we're looking at what are all of the costs and also what are the revenues. Quite often in this grant process, we're having funds requested, but we're not the total project cost. So the funding requested from the Community Foundation is just one of many funding streams that are going to support an overall bigger project. And then that relates to the ability to leverage multiple funding sources. And I'll touch upon this again in a moment with some examples. Some of the things, say maybe your board engagement, strength of governance of your organization, and just the overall operational health. Those might not all be written in the narrative, but we're going to talk about that when we have the review meeting as well. And again, we use volunteers for this process. So when I'm talking about the review meeting, that will be the volunteers that you're meeting with. For community impact grants, we use a panel, and a panel is 3 to 4 volunteers. So we group the volunteers by the number of requests that we receive, and that panel of volunteers could have 2 to 3 requests. They're going to read all of the information you put in the application, the financials, any of the supporting documentation that we talked about, that might be photos or extra impact stats, that kind of information. And then you're going to be scheduled to meet with them. And this is going to be a very succinct 20-minute meeting because they've done their homework. They've read through all of that. They're going to come prepared to ask you any additional questions. Maybe there's a key area. Let me go back a slide a moment. Again, they're looking at these areas to help guide funding recommendations they're going to make. And if they feel like something might not have been answered in the application, or they just want you to elaborate on it a little bit more or to clarify something, that is what that 20-minute time frame is for. And that's also why on the front end, we do put a little bit more time in the application when it's received. So you'll hear back from Julia and I when we get all of your materials, just to make sure we have the information that we need, that there aren't any kind of initial questions, and then what is the best information if there's additional, as we said, additional uploads or things to include, is we want to make sure that we can get them as much information as we can without overwhelming them. That's going to allow them to make a decision. And we will schedule that as well. And we have some some time frames of when to expect that would be scheduled. And again, that's on the Chautauqua Grants website. Okay, and as I promised, we're getting to some photos and some examples. So this slide these are examples of capital improvement projects and grants that we've made through community impact in the past. So the example here, Myers Memorial Library, they did a big renovation project to their main floor and some outside work as well. And this is an example I give with that this was a big overall project. The amount of the total project cost was a lot larger than the grant that we made to the organization. They were able to get a New York State construction grant through the library system and working with the state. And as a requirement, as part of that grant, they have a local match. So I believe it was up to 75% of that project was covered by this state grant. And then the library had to come up with the 25%. So they did some local fundraising, a few other things, and then they were able to write a grant to us for a portion of that as well. The next example is Rails to Trails. And so in the different trails around the county that they're rehabbing, this was resurfacing Webb Trail. I believe this was some crushed limestone. Again, we were one of several funders and some fundraising activities that helped support that. This fun group over here, we worked with the Village of Bemis Point, and they were resurfacing the pickleball / basketball court that was out in that area. This was also a phased project, so they have some other improvements that they're working on. We've worked with local municipalities for similar projects like this. I think of Hartley Park out in Lakewood. They've have had a big fundraising campaign for the new playground they're looking to install. And out in the town of Clymer, they also just recently were able to purchase some new playground equipment and have plans for that project to continue with a paving path and a few other things. But they were able to get an initial grant from us to help with some of those costs. Ongoing regular programming. So we have the Boys and Girls Club with a summer camp. Again, they just came for overall support for the different costs that were associated with hosting that summer camp. I think some of our friends from Community Connections at Finley Lake are on the call with us tonight as well. They came through for program support. Again, overall program support for all of the services that they provide throughout the year and helping to support seniors to remain independent in their homes. You're always up to something out there, keeping busy. And then Jamestown Public Market, again, all of the programming that they provide throughout the whole year, not just the public or the farmers market that's in the downtown community, but the mobile park market. And they have a new farm to school program. And I will point out here, so we, as we stated before, general grants are where we accept requests from faith-based organizations and churches for congregational needs. So if you have congregational needs for improvements or projects or things to your physical building or your parishioners that's going to benefit your congregation, you can only apply through the general grant process. And that is really based on, again, we have two funds that are specific to support those kinds of needs. We do, however, and have in the past, made a grant to a faith-based organization through community impact if it is for a larger and broader reaching community program. So I'll use the example of Jamestown Public Market is under the umbrella of St. Luke's Episcopal Church. We also have kind of just over the street from us, First Presbyterian runs a child care center, so a children's place. Something like that, if the church is the fiscal sponsor of that community program, we would accept a grant request in community impact for that. Again, just to get you thinking, and if you click through that link that Julia shared in the chat on the second page of that outlines the grant opportunities, there's some other examples of some past funding that we've done. Next, we're going to touch briefly on this. This is the next tier up, strategic project grants. This is for large scale programming and capital projects that would address a documented community need or or deliver significant economic impact. This is going to be anything that's over $20,000. But again, as we were saying in community impact in general, don't just look at the numbers. We really are looking for the type of project that you're seeking funding for. And I'll go over this in just a moment. We also have 2 deadlines a year, so December 1st and June 1st. We have a pre-application with this just because there is a little bit more entailed in the full application process. So we get just kind of the brief information of what the project is, what you're seeking funding for. We bring that to the board, and then by invitation, an organization is invited for a full application. Strategic project grants go directly to our board for decisions on funding. We break the groups out into panels similar to community service, but you just get several board members that are meeting with you. Here are some examples of past funding that we have supported through this opportunity. We have the Chautauqua Lake Watershed Management Alliance, and so we're just one of the funders again with their consolidated funding that they gather for Alliance members. The Salvation Army a new center. They were able to get a state grant, and they're going to be working on building out a new facility. And we were just, again, one of many funders that were able to come around them and support the local match portion that they needed. I think you might have seen it in the news. They just had a ribbon cutting. Infinity Visual and Performing Arts has opened a new Pearl City Playhouse. It's going to be kind of an adult, I think we have Infinity on here as well. Adult classes, and also our new revenue source to be able to support their mission for working with youth. They had a larger federal grant that was allowed to bring in. They brought in dollars for a lot of the programmatic components of it. And then we partnered with a local funder and another regional funder to help build out that space. Again, as you're thinking back to what we're looking for here, this is large scale and also wide reaching. So it is across our community. If you think back a few years, we were one of other funders locally that came around the Mental Health Association and provided support for their peer recovery coaching to address substance use disorder in our community. More recently, Jamestown Public Schools, as they were launching their new Summer Leap program, again, we were one of several local funders that came together and were able to help get that piloted and started. So we're looking for a wide and broad reach. Here is the website that we keep telling you all about. I'm actually, since we are on technology, can be a little dangerous, and see if I can bring up the actual website. So this is where we're going to be directing you to go. All of the information that we gave in the slides today, as Julia said, you can find it right here. You can go to our funders. There's many other funders that are listed on here. This is informational for all of you to access. These funders are separate entities from the Community Foundation, so you're going to have to look through. There's different contexts for each of those funders, and they have different criteria, eligibility, all of that. But if you find us here, this will look very familiar to a lot of the information that we were just going over, from general, community impact, strategic project, etc. If you click on any of these, it's going to open up and give you a little bit more information as well. We will share out this link. I can follow my mouse here. So we have a new tips page, and we have information here. This is the PDF that I've been referencing. Again, it's just a nice printout of the different grant applications that you can apply for, kind of a one-pager of when were those deadlines, what are all those numbers that they gave me. This would be a great resource. And here are some ideas of some past grant awards that we've made, just to really get you thinking. You'll find Julia and my information kind of across everything. We just want to tell you that, again, we're here to help. So you don't have to remember all of the dates and all of the amounts and what it was for. If you have a project or a need, don't hesitate to reach out, and we're happy to chat and talk with you a bit more. That is the end of our presentation there. I'm going to hit pause. And if anyone has any questions, we'll stick around here to help provide you some answers.